What if I told you consumer retention was simply a myth in the world of CPG? Welcome to the Foresight Strategy Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Schwab, brand strategist with over 25 years experience in communications and advertising. And today we explore the topic of recruitment versus retention and why both may actually be missing the point and why we should all be using the term re-recruitment. With me today is Vittorio and Nick from Foresight Strategy. Welcome, guys.
Yes, I'm Vittorio Raimondi. I'm the managing partner of the firm, which we established about 15 years ago. But I've been in consulting for 25 years, which is a bit of a scary thought, a quarter of a century. And I've worked with a number of Fortune 100 brands, from pharmaceuticals like Pfizer to online travel, like Booking.com, eBay, Salt Technology, as well as CPG, from Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, SC Johnson, Beam Suntory, and we work with HP as well. So bunch of companies that tend to have a global reach.
Yeah, my name's Nick Lucas. I'm a partner at Foresight Strategy, and I lead a lot of our consumer growth strategy work, and I work with mainly leading CPG brands. Vittorio mentioned a few, but some of the biggest brands I work with are at Coca-Cola, companies like Johnson & Johnson, Kimberly-Clark.
So I can't tell you both how many conversations, discussions, debates I've been in when it comes down to recruitment versus retention. But I read your white paper, The Hidden Growth Gap, and it sounds like this entire time we may have been wrong and we should have actually been talking about re-recruitment. So tell me, what's re-recruitment?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing marketers miss is that retention in itself is an illusion. When we talk about re-recruitment, consumers make a choice every single day and in every single occasion, especially for CPG. So a marketer really needs to be focused on winning the consumer every single time they're making a purchase. And when we talk about retention in CPG, it's really...
Is this like a comforting myth?
There are no switching costs. There is no contract that it's signed, right? So this is an interesting concept borrowed from telcos, from professional services like banks, where you do sign a contract. There is a long-term subscription agreement of some sort, and then changing product as a cost. In CPG, you make a choice every single time, not just every day, every part of the day, at every occasion. You choose what brand you want to use as a...
Why do you think so many brands kind of cling to this retention idea, and is it creating a blind spot for them?
I think it's rooted into a history. There was a time where CPG brands were just growing. And so it's all about recruitment and building a frequency of consumption, building loyalty. And then all of a sudden in the early 90s with one of the first recessions, all of a sudden, oh shoot, we are losing penetration, we are losing incidence, we're losing consumers. How do we, and the word retain consumers came into, we need to borrow from companies that have been doing this for years, telecommunications, energy. We need to learn their techniques. How do we retain? And it became a pretty sexy concept that seemed to be powerful. Like, okay, how do we retain consumers? But I think that was a misleading concept that kind of took them away from the fact that it's not about retention. It's about re-winning them every single time.
Now, is that different for different brands? And I say that in the sense of whether you're an established brand or whether you're a challenger brand. Do you look at that differently?
When you talk about an established leader brand in the market, they do very good at re-recruitment, mainly because they're winning in both physical availability. They have a lot of shelf space in stores, and they also do a really good job with mental availability. And what they're able to do is to continue to win consumers over and over again. Challenger brands, you see a lot more consumers flowing in and out of those brands. So something they really can focus on for growth is continuing to win their consumers that they already have. Sometimes you just focus on penetration or recruitment, and they might be missing some of the opportunity, which is continuing to win those consumers that were buying you yesterday and getting them to buy you again today.
Absolutely. I was at a conference the other day and they talked a lot about the younger generations are actually going into the traditional models, sales models, marketing models, and funnels, really blowing it up. Lots of, changing decisions all the time. Do you think that plays into this as well when you look at audiences and younger generations, Gen Z, and the decisions that they're making?
Yeah, I think that's also somewhat of a trap today, is that marketers are going after Gen Z, and that they sometimes forget about their consumer base, which a lot of brands we work with, consumers are actually might be older or middle-aged consumers, and sometimes when they're going after the younger consumer base, they might be recruiting new people into the brand, but in doing that, they're alienating some of their core consumer base, which actually leads to losses in overall incidents because their core consumer base isn't feeling heard and isn't being messaged to, and actually is being neglected by their marketing.
That's fascinating. I suppose a lot of that is coming from because they're looking at these metrics, and they're so relying on these metrics. But in your white paper, you almost argue that a lot of times these metrics could be lying to them. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, those metrics which were established because this is all the data that was available at the time could provide to you, are not just lying. They're just not very. They can be misleading. You just mentioned incidents. Well, incidence is defined as the percentage of consumers that use your brand divided by the total number of possible consumers. So that percentage is incidence. In the world of maybe shoppers dynamic is called penetration. But it's an average. So your incidence could go down because maybe you are not recruiting new consumers, or because consumers that usually consume you are not consuming you any longer. So you need to go deeper and think of a bathtub. Incidence is the level of the water in the bathtub. But what really moves the incidence is the ability to bring water in and prevent water from flowing out. And so it's the understanding of those consumers switching that you really need to get. How many consumers are recruiting? How many consumers I'm re-recruiting? How many consumers am I migrating into a habit? How many consumers am I premiumizing? So the language needs to be shifted from this broad average matrix into more consumer metrics.
I like that, and how these things relate to each other. I feel like everyone's fallen in love with the dashboard, right? And these KPIs. And do you think the average KPIs are kind of disguising this?
I think there is missing a lot of the real dynamics behind those things moving. Think of transactions. That's another metric that is oftentimes used in CPG. Transactions is defined as the average number of product use of the average consumer. And then all of a sudden you see the average going down and we're losing frequency of usage. Wait a minute. Maybe you're recruiting a lot of new users that only use you occasionally. And so your average transactions, your average frequency of your consumer base is going down. But that's not because you're losing consumers or your consumers are consuming you less. It's because you are recruiting new consumers that come in at an occasional frequency.
And is it just that they're not looking deeper, or there's just an assumption that they're sticking with them, and that's that they're going to stay versus continually making changes like you talk about, Nick?
I think there's when you're looking at how is my brand performing, people get so stuck on looking at the number of people consuming your brand, how frequently they're consuming your brand. But people miss that underneath the surface. We call it whitewater because we think about underneath the surface, you can find insights in that why people might be consuming more of your brand or why people might be consuming less of your brand. So I think when you get stuck just looking at the incidence, the number of people using your brand, you kind of miss those insights in terms of flows from people using and not using your brand.
I love that. I read the white paper, that idea of a whitewater river and things churning underneath it. And I think if you guys ever write a book, you should call it Navigating Whitewater.
That's an idea.
So it's all underneath. I love this idea of like looking beneath. Is there a level of curiosity or creative thinking that kind of drives you to look underneath? organizationally?
Yeah, I think our company and what we really why our clients work with us is because we are curious and creative thinkers, and we like to take business questions and we really look underneath the surface, and we identify why consumers are behaving in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, curiosity is everything in our culture. We don't settle for. Sometimes we go beyond what our clients need because we are not happy ourselves, and we keep kind of pushing the boundaries and double clicking until we ourselves feel good about it. And we think of us as creatives with an analytical mind, because I think nowadays, for what we're doing, it's not just about being good with data and being analytical, but you need to be really creative in the way you think and use the data to kind of stitch it together.
I found that really interesting when I was doing some research looking at your site. You're almost positioned in this spot where you have that element of consumer behavior insights, but then you also have more of the traditional consultative strategic consulting. So how do you structure your organization to accomplish both of those?
You know, we're not hiring hundreds of people. We are a boutique consultancy. We really invest in our people's capabilities. We don't just hire people that are good with data. In our hiring process, we really vet for emotional intelligence, the ability to kind of think creatively out of the box. So the hiring is critical, and we're not going for quantity. You know, we have a strong team, and we invest a lot in training, in storytelling, presentation, creating a visually appealing presentation decks, because that's what we focus on. So we're not kind of on the extreme of data gigs, and we're not on the kind of framework, blue sky thinking. We sit exactly in the middle, which is what our clients need.
Yeah, I like this looking beneath. Jumping back a little bit to recruitment, can you give me a tangible example of someone you may have worked with this very idea?
Yeah, I'll give you an example from maybe technology in the online travel, where we find that one of the leading brands, not so established in the US, and trying to find more space for growth, we found that the opportunity for growing was in a number of people that had used that brand in the past and had started to use other brands. So they were sitting, they didn't have to go and recruit entirely new users. There was a lot of opportunity sitting in people that were already familiar with the service, but for some reason had only used it once or twice, and we're reverting back to use some of the more established competitors in North America.
Nick, anything?
Yeah, in the CPG space, we've actually seen this across many CPG clients. In the recent years, there's been a big health trend where people are looking for products that have less calories, less sugar. And with the CPG clients, what we've seen is a master brand that's actually been in decline. And the ability to use brands that have lower calories and low sugar is a way to re-recruit consumers back into the brand that they lost due to consumers having a health barrier and a reason why they stopped consuming the brand.
And I'll add something to this, and this is part of the 15-minute brand check that you can just click on the sign here and download. There is we have a discipline of growth that says, you need to know what to achieve in terms of your revenue, your volume targets, and then you need to identify where to play. Once you know where to play, then you can double click and see how to win in those places. Now, the where to play is essentially identifying how can you grow your brand? What are the pathways? We call them consumer growth levers. We mentioned a few today. We talked about recruitment, we talked about re-recruitment, we talked about habit building, which is sometimes for certain brands really the gold medal. That's what they really want to achieve. But you can talk about premiumization, you can talk about multiple product use when you have a portfolio. There are several consumer growth levers. They changed, especially depending on the industry. And so we work with AccuView, and I can speak openly about this because we talked about it at a recent conference. and AccuViews or contact lenses. And we discovered that, as we analyze the different ways that brand can grow, one of those ways was, of course, you can open up the category and convince people to move from glasses into contact lenses. Of course, you can win from other competitors. Of course, you can transfer to beauty contact lenses. There are many different ways to grow, but one was reach out to consumers that had used contact lenses in the past and restart using them again. This is what we ended up being the biggest consumer growth levers in Japan, where they discovered there were a lot of consumers that had used contact lenses. They stopped using them for whatever reason, went back to spectacles, to glasses, and there was an opportunity to win them back. And they put together an incredible campaign about being reborn. The technology was there to convince them to come back, and that unlocked a huge growth for the brand. So having identified where to play was critical to then put their marketing money in the right place.
So if I'm a marketer listening, how do I understand or think about what all my, because you said there's a number of growth levers. What are all my growth levers? And then how do I measure, I guess, the data or how well I'm doing within each growth lever? Because I need to prioritize, right?
Yeah, the way we typically look at the market is through behaviors. So when we're looking at different companies in different categories and brands, we look at how people use the categories and how they use the brands. For instance, in a category like CPG, typically we're looking at how many times you use a brand per month and how many times you use the category on a monthly basis. You can start to identify people that are really light users of the category, heavy users of the category, and also how much they consume of the brand. This can give you a point of view on where the consumer is sitting and what behaviors do we need to change. Do we need to move someone that's a light user into a heavy user of our brand? Or is there opportunity to actually grow the category? Maybe there's a lot of people that are in our addressable market that actually aren't consuming our category. For instance, in beverages, you might have a category like tea, ready-to-drink tea, where it might have a very small market that's consuming tea, but there's a lot of people that consume ready-to-drink beverages. So how do we get those people to start drinking this category of tea?
I love that. You behavioral segmentation, essentially. And similar, I've sat in 100 meetings where everybody talks about audience segmentation, but I don't feel like anyone's ever talking about behavioral segmentation. And that's a good example of something they should be looking at.
Yeah, because ultimately, how people think, how people values, this is all important maybe for some other things, but when it comes to articulating a consumer growth strategy, you want to know how do people consume the category, if at all, and put them in different buckets of, like you just described. And then once you have that clear, what's the right behavioral segmentation that makes sense for your industry? Like I said, it's different. We kind of simplify things. We talk about occasional heavy users, but it can really be radically different depending on the industry. Then you figure out which ones do you want to win over. And the way you do it in terms of quantifying those things, there's primary research that you can do. And nowadays it's relatively cheap to run it. And if not, there are other ways that we help our clients figuring out and calibrate these models.
Yeah, I love this. How would you? You're talking a lot about behavior. Do you base that on how your customers are behaving today, how they have behaved, or are you looking at trends moving forward, future behavior?
It's really all three. I think first we typically start with the present to see where the consumers are today. And then you can look back, if you have the data, you can look back historically to see how have the segments changed historically. And what are the flows between segments too? Do people typically move up in consumption? Do they switch into the category? How many people do we realistically think we can convert into drinking, using our brand? And then you can look into the future and start to identify, do we think we can win more consumers than we did historically? Or who do we think we can win within our behavioral segments? And that really dictates different scenarios and different priorities for your marketing into the future. And marketing can be very different in terms of who you want to win.
Right.
If you're talking about recruiting someone that has not consumed the category before, you're talking about a lot of different barriers than someone that might be consuming the category and just not your brand.
And so oftentimes we stay away from talking about predicting consumer future switching because we deeply believe that you create your future as a marketer. You can learn historical changes and also understand what the current lay of the land is. But then you use this information to choose for your brand how you want to grow, which, like Nick said, is a mix of where do you think you have bigger opportunities and programs that can actually help unlock that growth. Once you have both together, that's where you focus on and create your future. We don't forecast, we provide foresight.
I see what you did there. I love this behavioral. And would you argue behavioral segmentation might even be more important than audience segmentation?
I think it should dictate your audience segmentation, because if you use a behavioral segmentation, one of the beauties of it is you can actually get down to why or what types of products you should be marketing to different behavioral segments too, which connects to commercial strategies, like what types of packs and channels people might be more likely to consume in. For instance, again, I'll go back to the category recruitment example. If you're trying to get someone to try your product for the first time, you might be better or more likely to consume it in smaller packages, entry type packs, than other strategies. So having this consumer-centric point of view can dictate or can influence your audience planning, but also can help you with a more integrated marketing plan.
And I think this builds again on the 15-minute brand check that we have, talking about audiences without having talked about where to play, in our opinion, is a bit of an inefficient way of going about communications, because you need to know where to play. Are you trying to win more consumption from your current consumer base? Are you trying to talk to people that don't consume you at all? Are you trying to talk to competitors, users that are not using your brand, or whatever it is? Once you're clear of where do you want to play, now you move into the how to win, and that's where you want to understand your audiences within that well-defined behavioral segment, which might skew for a certain socioeconomic level, certain geographies, certain demographics. So you need that to begin with before then moving into audiences.
That makes sense. So does this approach, this framework, has it shifted conversation at the C-suite with regards to maybe moving from a broader strategy to a sharper behavioral type strategy? Is that?
I mean, we see this with our clients. That's the language they talk now. They don't talk about we need to win in teenagers or whatever. There's a language that is, it's where the behavioral component is part of it. We need to accelerate our weekly plus consumers. We need to focus on our lapsed users. That was the AccuView Johnson & Johnson example. So much more focused and strategically relevant language.
Like that. So if I'm a senior marketer, I'm listening right now. You talked a little bit about this 15-minute brand growth check. Is that a good place to start? Where does someone start in kind of trying to evaluate their different growth levers and how they're doing there to get to a behavioral type place?
Yeah, the 15-minute brand check is a great starting place, which will walk you through starting from what to achieve as a marketer for your marketing plans, to where to play. Do you have a clear understanding of who you want to win? Then how to win. Do you have insights that allow you to understand how to win those consumers and actually unlock growth? And then you get to the how to execute too, which is one part of the equation that needs to be in place in order to actually unlock real growth. And the checkup really does a good job going through those 4 steps, so you can identify where in the process do you have gaps.
And that's, I think, builds on what you said before about the integrated marketing campaigns, whereby your commercial elements, the pack that you're pushing, the channels that you're using, the customers with which you're trying to kind of penetrate the market in terms of distributions, need to connect back to the where to play. If you're trying to win in out-of-home occasions, certain channels, certain customers, certain types of packs are better suited than others. So definitely, if you follow the steps that you can literally do in 15 minutes, you have a better chance to validate that your plans the commercial execution is in sync with the consumer strategy.
And is this CPG? We talked a lot about CPG. Is it only work for CPG, or do you think this is more this approach works?
Absolutely universal. It's just the way it manifests itself and it's executed. Like philosophy applies across. We have used it, like I said, in technology, pharmaceuticals. In fact, it kind of started with working with pharmaceuticals where you used to have better information. Now we have similarly good information in CPG and others, but in pharmaceutical, telecoms and stuff, you had true switching behavior. It's just the way you categorize consumers in behavioral segments and the pathways, what we call consumer growth levers, that change. But the philosophy is the same and is equally applicable.
You talked earlier about traditional models of audience, maybe going after teenagers or going after Gen Z, and this how much better of an approach this is. Do you see this kind of blowing up other traditional marketing models?
Yes, because there is several marketing models, starting from Eric Bass that talks about it's all about recruitment, which they themselves have admitted it's just a slogan. But they all take a point of view. If you look at some other agencies that talk about, no, you need to focus on your heavier users. That's where the growth can come from. These models take sides. Our philosophy doesn't take side. It could be that it's about recruitment. It could be that it's all about talking to your heavy consumers and premiumize them, or maybe take them to using multiple products into your portfolio. Mm-hmm. We don't take sides. We need to take an economically correct picture of the world and of your consumer landscape and understand where do you want to play.
In your white paper, is that what you say neutrality is a strength in strategy?
Yeah, it's a philosophy. So that's why I pushed back on you said, so is re-recruitment what all CPG brands should be? No, wait a minute. This is one way to grow, and they should talk about re-recruitment, not retention. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right priority for every brand. It depends on where you are and the landscape.
So there's a little bit of obsession with loyalty and retention to CPG, and you think that's just kind of the hangover, and we got to move past it to this kind of a new philosophy, new approach that we're talking about today.
Yes, especially today that we are navigating white waters. And what we mean with that is consumers' habits keep changing. You just mentioned Gen Z. They're just all over the place. You got to understand the structure behind the behaviors. You need to understand what's underneath.
Yeah.
Get that clarity. And the clarity then give you the confidence, and confidence lead to commitment in your plans.
Yeah. And with this changing consumer behavior, I mean, that's a question. How often should one be kind of reevaluating their growth levers?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, with our clients, we typically look at growth levers on a kind of different basis. One is looking at how the consumers have changed in the past year, which I think is something that brands should be doing on a continual basis to identify, are our marketing plans actually working? Are we actually moving consumers that we want to move? Are we actually changing the behaviors we want to change? And then the future-looking scenario planning is really important just to set long-range plans and really the priorities for the organization. So we typically do that on a yearly basis with our clients, really to ground the marketing organization on what are the clear priorities and get the clarity and confidence to the marketing teams.
Is that kind of what it feels like? You worked with a number of companies now. Would the confidence? Do they have clarity? What does it look like after a marketer maybe adopts this approach?
I mean, it's amazing because you see starting to adopt a language, especially for companies with global reach. It becomes the currency, the language with which they can even communicate across markets. And so building a common language is important. And it really opens up. It is a foundational piece that allows to then have more solid plans.
So what advice would you give to other insight leaders maybe? They feel like, I'm not quite sure, things are stalling out, but the data looks good, right? They're looking at dashboards, metrics look good, spend seems to be normal. Should they be taking a look?
Yeah, I mean, they should reach out to Foresight. But really, if you're stalling and you're not seeing incidents or penetration gains and your volume or sales are stalling, you really should be looking deeper into consumer behaviors and understand what's going on. Is it because we have a leaky bucket? Is it because there's a lot of consumers that are dropping off our brand that we're not re-recruiting? Is it because we're not doing enough recruitment, bringing consumers in? Is it a frequency problem? I think if you don't have answers to those questions, you really don't have clarity on how to grow your brand into the future. So marketers should be looking at consumer behaviors.
And I would add, if they have clarity on that, still you should look at that, because the next step, if you have clarity on where the growth is, the next step is, are your plans aligned with where the growth should be? And so many times we see with our clients, brand plans that look, marketers kind of come up with these flashy PowerPoint presentations that show incredible initiatives that look big on paper, and then you go and double click. There is no budget, there are no resources, they're not supported. And so there is a hidden disconnect between clarity on where to play and the actual plans that are executed in the market. And that diagnostic, it just doesn't happen. We have it in accounting. Deloitte comes in and will stress test your accounting. It just doesn't happen in marketing, not yet.
Well, I appreciate the time. It all makes sense. You must be doing something right, because not only are you working with these amazing brands, but they're coming back. I saw some stats on your site, so it's obviously working for them. Any last comments and regarding this approach today? Or
my comment is, it's not difficult, but it's not so daunting. Yeah. The data, it's there. Even if you think it's not, we can assure you it exists. We can be stitched together. Read this document. It's a 15-minute checkout. You can do it without our help. It's common sense, and will give you clarity. So don't be concerned about, oh shoot, I don't even know where to start. It's pretty clear and pretty linear.
Take a look at the brand check and definitely take a deep dive into your consumers and start to identify how you can win, or where you should play and how you can win into the future.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like I said earlier, you guys are taking such a different approach from the world that I've been in, the things that I've heard, and the arguments that I've overheard and been a part of. This is a much better approach, it looks like, sounds like. So thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Yes.
Thank you.